When billionaire Harrison Blake teaches chess to Zach, his housekeeper's son, he believes he is awakening a prodigy. But he is wrong. He is awakening a tragedy. The boy's phenomenal talent doesn't just defeat grandmasters, it awakens a buried terror within his own mother. Each of Zach's victories is another step closer to the truth about his deceased father, and his greatest match isn't for glory, it's to answer one question. Is the man mentoring him the long-lost father he seeks, or the very man who destroyed everything? The car pulled up in front of the grand house. Maria took a deep breath and squeezed Zach's hand. "The babysitter's sick, honey. I'm so sorry you have to come to work with me today." "It's okay, Mom," Zach murmured. "I brought my homework." As the library doors swung open, Zach's breath caught in his throat. Thousands of books lined the walls, floor to ceiling, creating an atmosphere that was both overwhelming and solemn. But he barely noticed them. His gaze was immediately captured by the single object in the center of the room. It was a chess set, but unlike the cheap plastic one at his school, its pieces looked like miniature soldiers, crafted from real gold and silver. "Wow," Zach breathed, forgetting to stay silent. Instantly, Maria's voice cut in, sharp with urgency. "Zach, over here," she called from across the room. "Sit at that little desk and do your homework, and don't touch anything." Zach sat down and opened his math book, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the chessboard. He was only stealing glances, but it felt as if the board had a strange pull of its own. A few moments later, a butler appeared at the doorway. "Miss Maria, Mr. Blake requires your assistance in the drawing room." Maria hesitated, her anxious gaze flickering from Zach to the chessboard and back again. "I'll be right back. Remember what I said. Do not leave this desk." Maria was gone. The room fell silent, leaving Zach alone with the silent invitation of the chessboard. His mother's warning felt like an invisible tether, but the pull of the board was stronger. He tiptoed closer, his heart pounding. He gently opened the wooden box that held the off-board pieces, and then he saw it. Tucked away beneath the velvet lining at the bottom was a piece that didn't belong to the ornate set. It was made of dark ebony wood, exquisitely carved. A knight. Carved into its base was a single letter, Z. Confused, Zach picked up the knight. On an instinct he couldn't explain, he began rearranging the pieces on the board, setting up a complex attacking formation he'd only ever seen in books. He placed the wooden knight on a critical square, a pivotal move. "Who taught you that formation?" A deep, warm voice spoke from right behind him. Zach jumped, startled, dropping the wooden knight onto the thick carpet. He spun around, his face draining of color, terrified of being caught. Standing before him was a tall man in an impeccable suit. He had salt and pepper hair and kind, deep blue eyes that were looking right at him. It was him, Harrison Blake. I'm sorry, sir," Zach stammered, his eyes darting back to his open book. "It's quite all right," Blake said, his voice gentle. "I was asking, do you enjoy chess?" "I don't really know how, sir," Zach whispered, his gaze still glued to the pieces. "My teacher at school showed us once, but I've never played a real game." Just then, Maria returned. She froze in the doorway when she saw Zach standing by the chessboard with Mr. Blake. Sheer terror was plain on her face. "Mr. Blake, I'm so sorry." "Zach, let's go." "Hold on, Maria." Blake's voice was still gentle, but it carried a weight that made her freeze. His eyes were locked on Zach with a strange fascination she had never seen before. "A talent, left uncultivated," he mused, "is a terrible waste." Blake turned to the boy. "I could teach you to play, Zach, if your mother permits it." That single sentence placed the entire burden on Maria's shoulders. Zach looked at his mother, his eyes brimming with hope. Maria felt her throat tighten. That's really not necessary, sir," she managed. "I mean, I'm sure you're very busy." "Never too busy to teach a bright boy about chess," Mr. Blake replied. "What do you say, Zach?" Zach's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Yes, please." The chess lessons became a ritual. One afternoon, deep in a complex game, Zach made a daring move, sacrificing his rook for a strategic offensive position with his knight. He looked up, expecting praise. Instead, he was met with a strange silence. Mr. Blake had gone still, his gaze no longer on the board but locked onto Zach's face. The boy's intense concentration, the way his brow furrowed in thought, it seemed to stir a memory deep within him. A profound sadness and a flicker of regret surfaced in his deep blue eyes. He reached out, as if to stroke the boy's hair, but his hand froze mid-air before he pulled it back. "A fine move," he said, his voice suddenly husky and distant. Very familiar. That evening, while helping his mother clear out an old wardrobe, Zach accidentally knocked a dusty shoebox off the top shelf. The first thing he saw was a faded photograph. In it, a much younger Maria was beaming beside a tall man with a brilliant smile. He looked a lot like Mr. Blake, only younger, his face full of life. "Mom," Zach called, his voice laced with innocence as he held up the photo. "Who's the man in this picture? He looks a little like Mr. Blake." Instantly, the color drained from Maria's face. The smile vanished from her lips. She lunged forward, her eyes wide with panic, and snatched the photo from Zach's hand as if it were a loaded gun. She scrambled to shove it back into the box, thrust the box onto a high shelf, and locked the cabinet door. Her breathing was ragged, every movement radiating a raw, desperate fear. "It's no one," she said, her voice turning cold as she kept her back to him, trying to hide her trembling. "Just an old friend. Now, forget you ever saw it." On the 15th day, Zach beat Mr. Blake at chess. "Congratulations, Zach. That was a beautiful game. I won. I actually won." Zach's heart felt like it would burst. And it wasn't luck. I planned that victory 5 moves ahead. A wave of pure joy washed over him. "Can we play again right now?" Of course. They played 3 more games that afternoon. Zach won 2 of them. That evening, long after Maria and Zach had left, Mr. Blake sat alone in the library. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Chen, it's Harrison Blake. I need you to come to my house tomorrow. There's a child I want you to meet." "What kind of child?" Chen asked from the other end. "The kind that comes along once in a lifetime." The next morning, Mr. Blake paced his library. He had barely slept. Today, Lisa Chen was coming to watch Zach play chess. Chen was the best chess coach in the country. She'd trained 3 world champions and discovered more chess prodigies than anyone. But what if he was wrong? What if Zach was just a bright kid who happened to be good at a game? Mr. Blake's anxiety was cut short by the doorbell. He took a deep breath, composing himself into his usual calm demeanor as he went to greet his guest. Lisa Chen entered with the unmistakable air of a top-tier professional. She wasted no time on pleasantries. Her sharp gaze swept across the library, finally settling on Zach, who stood timidly beside his mother. "So this is the boy, Harrison?" she asked, her voice calm but probing. "This is Zach," Blake replied, trying to hide his own nerves. "Would you like to play a game of chess with me?" Chen asked Zach. He looked to Mr. Blake, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Okay," Zach agreed. But what happened next took Chen completely by surprise. Zach wasn't just playing chess, he was executing a plan. Each of his moves had a purpose, building upon the last. After a few moves, Chen thought, "The boy is clever." After 10 moves, she had to focus completely. Zach's moves were logical and audacious. After 20 moves, Dr. Chen realized she was in real trouble. A web of attack was tightening around her king. "Check," Zach said softly. Dr. Chen tried to maneuver out of it, but it was too late. Zach had laid a perfect trap. This 8-year-old boy was in complete control of the game, and she had no defense. In that very moment, Chen's focus shifted from the board. That move. It was eerily familiar. She glanced up toward the doorway where Maria stood, her face pale, her eyes glued to the game with a haunted intensity. Maria's posture, the way she unconsciously clenched her fists when Zack moved a piece, and especially that audacious move. It all reminded Dr. Chen of a legend, a phantom prodigy who had shaken the chess world years ago before vanishing without a trace. The game continued. A few moves later, the inevitable arrived. "Checkmate," Zack whispered, hardly daring to believe he'd won. Dr. Chen stared blankly at the board. She had lost, utterly defeated by a child who wasn't even out of grade school. That's impossible. "Did I do something wrong?" Zack asked, worried he had made a mistake. "No, child," she said, her voice full of a new kind of respect. "You've done something incredible." Chen opened her briefcase and pulled out the final test. A book filled with the most fiendishly difficult chess puzzles. She flipped to a complex position, a problem that had taken her best students hours to solve. "Zack, how does white deliver checkmate in 3 moves?" Zack simply tilted his head, studying the book for less than a minute. Then he pointed to a square. "Knight to here," he said calmly. "The king has no escape." Dr. Chen's mouth fell slightly open. It was the exact, perfect solution. She flipped to a harder puzzle. Zack solved it in minutes. She turned to one considered nearly unsolvable. He solved it even faster. The pages kept turning, and with each one, the astonishment on Dr. Chen's face grew, transforming into sheer, unadulterated awe. This boy wasn't just a talent, he was a phenomenon. While Zack was engrossed in the book, Chen turned to Maria, who was trying to shrink into the shadows. "Miss," Chen asked, her voice low and probing, "have you ever played chess? You look remarkably familiar." Maria flinched as if struck. She avoided Chen's gaze, stammering, "No, I know nothing about chess. I'm just here for my son." With that, she turned away abruptly, but the sheer panic in her eyes did not escape the expert's discerning gaze. "Mr. Blake," Chen said quietly, "may I have a word with you in private?" Zack pretended to study the chessboard, but he could hear their hushed whispers. "The child is extraordinary," Chen said. "I've taught chess for 25 years, and I have never seen raw talent like this." "What does that mean?" Mr. Blake asked. "It means he could be a champion. With the right training, he could compete with the best players in the world. Zack could be famous. But he's 8 years old. The greatest chess players often start young. Bobby Fischer was a grandmaster at 15. Some are even younger when they first show their gift." Zack felt a thrill of excitement and fear all at once. He didn't really understand what they were talking about, but it sounded important. As they left that evening, Mr. Blake walked Maria to the car while Zack skipped ahead. "He reminds me of him," Mr. Blake said softly, breaking the silence. Maria froze, her entire body tensing. "Please, don't. Maria, we can't hide from this forever. Zack's talent, it's a legacy. We have a responsibility to nurture it. My responsibility is to protect my son." Maria whirled around, her voice a furious whisper. "Protect him from the very thing that destroyed." She trailed off, realizing she'd said too much. "Destroyed his father," Mr. Blake finished for her, his own voice low and heavy with sympathy. Maria didn't answer. She turned away, her trembling hand fumbling for the car door handle. "I know you're afraid," Mr. Blake called after her, "but this time will be different. I won't let that tragedy happen again." Maria scrambled into the car and sped away. From the back seat, Zack glanced in the rearview mirror. He saw Mr. Blake standing alone under the pale yellow porch light, his long shadow stretching out on the driveway, looking impossibly lonely. That night, Zack lay in bed, his mind replaying the chess puzzles and the way Mr. Blake had looked at his mother. Something big was happening, something the adults understood, and he didn't. And for the first time since he started playing chess, Zack felt a flicker of fear. The following week, Dr. Chen returned, not to teach, but to make an offer that would change everything. "The National Youth Chess Championship is next month," she announced, placing a colorful brochure on the marble chessboard. "And I want to enter Zach." Zach stared at the brochure. Kids his age, dressed in serious suits, sat in a grand, elegant hall. The words, "The Path to Glory," were written in shimmering gold letters. "No," Maria said instantly, her voice sharp. "He's only 8. The other children will be older and more experienced." "Maria, age is irrelevant in chess," Dr. Chen explained patiently, though her own gaze was firm. "Talent is everything, and Zach's talent is something I haven't seen in my entire career." Mr. Blake, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "I agree with Lisa. We should let the boy try." "That's not your decision to make," Maria snapped, turning on Mr. Blake, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and ill-concealed fear. The room fell utterly silent. All eyes were on Maria, who had just crossed the invisible line between employee and employer. Her face was flushed, her hands clenched into tight fists. "I'm sorry," she whispered, mortified. I don't want him to be pressured." "Mom, I want to try," Zach said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. "Playing chess is fun. Maybe playing with other kids will be fun too." Maria looked at her son's hopeful face, and the defensive walls she had built seemed to crumble. She let out a long sigh, one of weary resignation. "If it's what you really want, I really, really do." 3 weeks later, they drove to the big city for the tournament. Zach had never been anywhere so grand. Maria held his hand tightly, pulling him close. "Why are you so nervous, Mom?" Zach asked. "I just don't want anything bad to happen to you," she whispered. "What bad thing could happen?" Zach replied innocently. "It's just chess, Mom." Zach's words made Maria pause. "That's right," she said softly, but her eyes held a distant look. "It's just chess." In her mind, however, the phrase carried a completely different weight, one heavy with tragedy. The atmosphere in the grand tournament hall was overwhelming. Hundreds of chessboards were lined up in perfect rows, and the rhythmic ticking of chess clocks created a symphony of concentration. Zach, the youngest competitor in the tournament, walked into his first match with a mix of nerves and excitement. He quickly defeated his first opponent, a boy 2 years his senior, then the second and the third. Zach wasn't just winning, he was winning beautifully. He didn't celebrate loudly. Instead, after each game, he would shake his opponent's hand, sometimes even pointing out a better move they had missed. His humility and talent began to draw the attention of other parents and coaches. "Who is that kid?" one man whispered. "He plays like a miniature grandmaster." Every compliment, every admiring glance aimed at Zach felt like a needle prick to Maria. She didn't sit with the other parents. She stood in a secluded corner, wringing her hands, her face a constant mask of tension. She wasn't watching the board. She was watching her son, as if afraid he might simply vanish at any moment. After winning the semi-final in spectacular fashion, Zach ran to his mother, his face glowing. "Did you see, Mom? I did it. The final is tomorrow." But instead of a smile, he was met with a hug so tight it almost hurt. "I'm so proud of you," Maria whispered, but her voice was trembling. On the way back to the hotel, a reporter intercepted them. "Excuse me, you're Zach, right? Can you tell us who your chess inspiration is? Your father, perhaps?" Zach looked bewildered, but before he could answer, Maria pulled him away, her voice cutting through the air like ice. "Sorry, we're not giving interviews." The reporter's question was like a key, unlocking Pandora's box in Zach's heart. For the rest of the evening, he was unusually quiet. He watched other kids being hugged and congratulated by their fathers. He watched Mr. Blake and Dr. Chen intensely discussing strategies for the final match. Everyone was here, yet the biggest question of his life remained unanswered. That night, in their hotel room, Zach couldn't sleep. He sat up in bed, watching his mother pack their things with a poorly concealed anxiety. He took a deep breath. It was time. He couldn't walk into the most important match of his life with a heart heavy with questions. "Mom, I'm begging you, please, just tell me." Zach's voice, full of a raw and desperate plea, pierced the silence of the room. Maria froze, her back still turned to him. Zach slid off the bed and moved closer. "The man in the picture. Was he my dad? Is he Mr. Blake? Why are you so scared every time I talk about chess? I haven't been completely honest with you." Finally, Maria turned around slowly. Her face was streaked with tears, etched with a raw, soul-deep exhaustion. You think Mr. Blake is your father, don't you?" she asked, her voice raspy. Zach nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Maria shook her head, a slow, bitter movement. Her smile was a grimace of pain. "No, Zach, Mr. Blake, he's not your father." The words hung in the air. Zach stood stunned, confusion clouding his face. Then why? Why was she so afraid? Maria brought a trembling hand to her chest, as if holding her shattered heart together. "The man in the picture," her voice broke. "That was David, your real father." The name David sounded foreign. Zach had never heard it before. "Your father," Maria continued, her eyes gazing into a past that was both glorious and tragic. "Your father David was a chess player, more brilliant than anyone I have ever known. I loved him so much." A light flickered in Zach's eyes. His dad was a chess player too, but then the smile on Maria's lips vanished, replaced by a look of sheer terror. "But chess," she said through gritted teeth. "It took him from me." "Took him? What do you mean?" Zach asked, a chill running down his spine. Tears streamed down Maria's face again. She couldn't look her son in the eye as she spoke the most painful words of all. He was a prodigy, but with genius comes a terrible pressure. The tournaments, the expectations, the sleepless nights, they wore him down. He just couldn't take it anymore. She looked up, her eyes filled with a grief so profound it felt bottomless. He chose to die and disappeared from our lives. Right before the World Championship final, the room seemed to tilt. Chose to die and disappeared. The truth was more horrifying than anything Zach could have imagined. His father hadn't just passed away, he had been destroyed by his own passion. Now, it all made sense. His mother's fear, her hatred of the game, it all had a reason. Zach looked up, his vision blurred by tears. If Mr. Blake isn't my father," he asked, his voice hoarse, "then why did he do all of this? Why did he find us? Why did he teach me to play?" It was the one question Maria had always avoided. She took a deep breath, as if telling the truth about David had freed her of one burden, only to face the next. "Because he was part of that tragedy too, Zach," she said softly. "Harrison Blake was your father's mentor." Zach froze. Everything had just become infinitely more complicated. "He was the one who discovered David's talent," Maria continued, her voice no longer holding any hatred, only a profound, bottomless sorrow. "He taught him, championed him, and pinned all his hopes on your father. He believed David would become the greatest world champion of all time." Maria walked to the window, gazing out at the city's nightscape, but he didn't realize that those expectations, that pressure, it became an unbearable weight. "When your father vanished, it didn't just destroy my life, it destroyed Mr. Blake's as well. He spent years living with guilt and regret." Maria's voice trailed off. "He believes he's the one who pushed his greatest student to the edge. He's been haunted by David's disappearance ever since." She turned back to face him, looking Zach straight in the eye, letting him see the whole, unvarnished truth. "And then, years later, he found us. When he saw you, saw the way you were mesmerized by the board, saw the same raw talent that David had, he saw a chance. A chance for redemption," Maria said, her voice filled with a surprising empathy for the man she had once feared. "He hired me as a housekeeper just to be near you. He taught you, championed you, because in his eyes, you aren't just Zach, you are David's legacy. You are his second chance to fulfill the promise of the student he lost. Zach finally understood. Mr. Blake wasn't his father, but their bond was something deeper, more complex. He was the mentor with a debt to his fallen student, and Zach was the living embodiment of that debt and that hope. Every thoughtful gaze, every special concern, every effort from Mr. Blake, it all made sense now. Dawn was breaking over the city, but inside the hotel room, the night felt like it had never left. The weight of the truth about his father, David, and the burden Mr. Blake carried now rested on Zach's small shoulders. He had stayed up all night, not thinking about strategy, but trying to process a tragic inheritance. Maria sat beside him. For the first time in years, she was no longer trying to pull her son away from chess. She just quietly took his hand. "You don't have to compete anymore, Zach," she said softly. "Not if you don't want to." Zach shook his head. "No, Mom," he replied. His voice had lost the innocence of yesterday, but in its place was an extraordinary resolve. "I have to play, not just for me. I'm playing for Dad. And for Mr. Blake, too." As Zach walked into the tournament hall, everything felt different. The flashing cameras, the murmuring crowd, the intense look on his opponent's face, none of it could distract him now. The pressure of a championship had been replaced by a greater weight, a higher purpose. Mr. Blake and Dr. Chen stood in a corner, while Maria, for the first time, stood just behind the spectators' barrier, where she had a clear view of her son. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a look of unwavering trust and unconditional support. The match was incredibly tense. Zach's opponent was a brilliant young player with a ferocious, attacking style. There were moments when Zach seemed cornered, echoing the very pressure that had destroyed his father. But each time, he would take a deep breath and glance toward his mother and Mr. Blake. He wasn't fighting alone. With a series of resilient defensive moves and a stroke of counterattacking genius, Zach turned the game around, to the astonishment of everyone in the room. Checkmate. The hall erupted in applause. Zach had become the national youth champion. During the award ceremony, standing on the victor's podium with the gleaming gold trophy, Zach took the microphone. Everyone expected a champion's speech, but he did something unexpected. "Thank you, everyone," he said, his voice clear and steady. "This trophy isn't just for me. It's for my father, David, a chess player who I believe is smiling down on us right now. And it's for our great mentor, Mr. Harrison Blake." Mr. Blake stood frozen, his eyes welling up. "With all of the prize money," Zach continued, "I want to start a free chess club for kids who can't afford it, so everyone can feel the joy that chess can bring." The hall fell silent for a moment before erupting in an applause even greater than when he had won. It wasn't applause for a player, but for a kind heart. The story closes a few months later. The library of the Blake estate is no longer a place for tense, one-on-one lessons, but a room filled with the laughter of children. The David and Zach Chess Club has been born. Mr. Blake, no longer a solitary billionaire, is now patiently showing a little girl how to move the queen. Maria stands beside him, smiling as she hands out cookies to the kids. And Zach, the champion, is deeply engrossed in a joyful game with a boy even younger than him. They share no blood, but they have become a family, a perfectly imperfect family, built on loss and painful truths, but bound together by understanding, forgiveness, and love. On the great chessboard of life, they had found the most beautiful move of all, a move to heal, a move to share, and a move to ensure that the legacy of chess would be passed on forever, not as a burden, but as a gift,